Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today is Feb 15, 2026. Want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. Please subscribe. Also want to thank David Collar for introducing me to today's guest, Susanna Crossman. Where are you calling from?
From Brittany in France.
How cool is that? First question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
So I'm going to say care. To
care. I never get that word. Care is a great word.
I'm interested in care as a concept, care as being attentive to people, care in our careless world.
Yeah. There's another word that's come up a lot recently is self-care.
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I think there's a whole kind of industry around self-care, and sometimes a kind of, I guess, a reappropriation of how Audre Lorde used it originally. But yeah, self-care is important, self-care. And I think caring for each other and caring for what we do and being attentive to what we do.
Beautiful. What's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
I really love books. I'm a writer. I love the intimacy of books. I absolutely love nonverbal communication. As an arts therapist and a drama therapist, I've worked with a lot of nonverbal people, and I'm really interested in that. And I think I'm specifically interested in the unexpectedness of communication.
Yeah.
When communication surprises you. And I think that's one of the most astonishing things, where it takes us somewhere we didn't expect to go.
Love it. So beautiful. To books and reading, did you become a reader, 1, because your parents told you, 2, they did it as an example, or 3, on your own?
So I taught myself to read when I was about 3.5. And I had an elder sister and a younger brother, and my mum used to put them outside. I was put on my own in a playpen so I could read. So I taught myself to read when I was about 3.5, and I've avidly read since then, really avidly. And I remember once a few years ago seeing if I could go 24 hours without reading and really struggling.
That's a hard one. That's such a beautiful attempt. Fasting is so important, and to self-impose it. That's the hard, anything like that. That is really, that there's a great McLuhan line, carefully make plans, then do the opposite.
That sounds like Oblique Strategies. That sounds like one of those John Cage cards.
Oblique Strategies is Cage?
Yeah, I think it's Cage. Didn't John Cage do it, and with somebody else? I love that. It's a kind of, it's again a random approach. I'm really influenced by Dadaism. And MERS and things like that, and the idea of finding order in randomness. Or finding meaning in randomness, rather.
Yeah, Cage and McLuhan hung out, so that's great. Oblique Strategies. I love that. So why do you think humans collect or gather information?
I think to try and understand why we're here. There was a really good book I read years ago by this woman, Nancy Houston. She went and worked in prisons, and people said, why do you bother writing novels? All of our lives are so weird. Like, why do you do that? Why are you gathering? Why are you trying to understand? And I guess we're these sentient creatures, so we have to think we're here for a reason. So I think we're gathering information and creating culture, maybe in a search for beauty as well.
Yeah. Well, that's a great, you really spanned it from understanding why we're here, meaning, and beauty. But you kind of answered it, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
I think it's innate.
Yeah.
I think it's innate. There's a brilliant French philosopher, Bachelard, and he wrote this book called The Psychoanalysis of Fire. And it's all about how fire actually isn't, people didn't make fire just to be warm. They made fire so they could dream and experience desire and invention. And so I think there's a whole side of our existence which is existential, which is about kind of discovering meaning.
I saw you reference him. There's a lot of good YouTube videos of you talking and interviews in print online. I really appreciate that. And you mentioned him, and then I looked him up. How do you spell his name?
Bachelard. And he was
Bacca.
Belard.
Okay. And what's his first name?
Gaston.
Oh, Gaston. Okay. Yeah, I really want to check that out because what you taught me today, I was just intrigued by that whole fire thing.
Yeah, he wrote that book, and he's also written an extraordinary book, which is about the poetics of space,
Yeah.
which is all about understanding home. It's a book I referenced in my memoir, Home is Where We Start, a lot, because it's all about how you understand space. And he'll write about what's the meaning and the experience of being in an attic, and what's the meaning of being in a home, and what's the meaning of a corner or a drawer or a basement. And he has this extraordinary unpacking of different things of human experience. He's also written a lot about water and dreaming, um, and his book, The Psychoanalysis of Fire, which is one of his most famous books. He was a postman.
Do you know him?
No, he died maybe, I don't know when Bachelard died, maybe 50 years ago, because I know someone who was taught by him. But he was a postman and became a philosopher.
Wow. Amazing timing because I'm just writing an essay on space and I have enough, but now all of a sudden, I love that whole idea when you said attic because growing up, I would go into my attic and find stuff, and it was just this intriguing adventure because
Mm.
it's in boxes and whatnot. And so, do thoughts create emotions?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I had to have a think about that one. I would say thoughts create emotions, but emotions also create thoughts.
Yeah. No, I love it. It's because I put in my notes before we do these. I say silence is okay. That's a really hard thing for people to contemplate because if I ask you a question, it's like Rebecca Solnit says so well. Just because you ask me a question doesn't mean I have to answer it. But the timing is, if you, especially on something like this, we're on live TV across the world. You think, oh, you're going to let me sit and think how long,
Mm.
and so we almost self-impose this thing on ourselves. And I interviewed George Carlin's daughter Kelly, and she's a sort of like something like a therapist, like you, or philosopher therapist, and she would laugh at the question, then she would take a deep breath, and then she would answer it. So I'm for any sort of let me think about that. Or the guy yesterday was going, I'm going to have to ponder that one
Mm.
because we don't have, I want you to feel comfortable that you don't have to answer the question. I'm for anecdotes, stories, tangents, but these are just more or less prompts. And you used the word psychoanalysis earlier. It's like me and you are psychoanalyzing the wording on the questions. So I'm for people saying, well, let me change that word in your question. So it's more like a free for all. So I appreciate that. This is the next one. I don't know what I think until I fill in the blank.
I don't know what I think until I Feel.
Really good. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. And McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. A lot of people say feel or experience it, but I love that word feel. Can humans think without language?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I worked for years with non-verbal kids and young people and adults, actually. And I was always really amazed by their capacity to understand metaphor, humor, surprise without language. Um, so, yeah, I don't think we need language to think. Absolutely not.
Chomsky says language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
Me personally, what do I do?
Yeah.
I was going to say sing.
Oh, that's a great one. I love that. Well, that's like, that's before you go on, that's like first thought, best thought. So now you want to flesh it out, but I'll tell you the cliche I love. If you can't say it, sing it. If you can't sing it, dance it.
Yeah.
But that's beautiful. So go ahead if you want to flesh that out, or just sing is fine.
Yeah. Oh, you know where I think that comes from? I think that comes from actually, my sister died a decade ago, and I've written extensively about that, and there's a quote that I said actually in the speech when I spoke at her funeral, and then I put it in an essay that was just published last year. And it's how you use music when there's and poetry, they come when when language, there's suddenly these moments. And I think death is a particular moment like that, where suddenly the space for words, where silence, it's where silence and music suddenly have this extraordinary place, don't they? They
Yeah.
have this meaning. And I think silence I would put in that, with music and with song in that, actually. That there's so much that can be felt and experienced, and that we can communicate through those forms in those moments.
It's beautiful. Pascal said something like, "Oh, if you could just sit in a room in solitude and quiet, you could solve all the problems of the world." You know,
Mm.
and it's hard to do that. But I like that you blended silence, poetry, and music. Your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
I think we move in between those two, and I think there's moments where the feeling is deeply important, and moments where the thinking is really important. And I feel like actually that is probably our greatest challenge, is how we move. And when we trust our gut, and when we actually go, no, this is not a gut moment. This is actually a step back and think about it moment. And I feel like we constantly, in French they say, like a va-et-vient, it's like a to and froing in between those two things. It's like Arendt writes a lot about that, and thinking and how we think, and that kind of solitude, a bit like what you're saying with Pascal, that we need to think. And yet simultaneously, I feel like there are these moments where we overthink and we overcomplicate. And for example, making a vinaigrette, or I do this a lot with patients when they're overthinking. Well, I did it with a guy recently. We did Jackson Pollock kind of action painting, where you're entirely using your body, and it's kind of what the material world is giving you in that moment. And I feel like what we need is that flexibility as human beings, to be able to use this kind of really extraordinary sensorial kind of equipment that we have, where we're touching and feeling and smelling and tasting, and then be able to step outside as well. So yeah, it's a to and a fro.
Yeah, I when I worked for George Carlin, we got a flyer in the mail and says, "I'm trying to get more control over my spontaneity."
Mm,
And so that word in French for to and froing, how do you
mm.
spell that word?
It's va, to go, et, and, so et, and vient, va et vient, to go and come back.
To go and come
Come
back.
back, va et vient. Yeah.
Yeah, come back. That's good. I need that. And I appreciate that because we invented the word thinking and feeling, so we think we can separate them, but you really can't. They're like yin and yang or something. But it is interesting how you distinguish that, because Bridget Bardot says, "When I make love, I don't think," and I'm like, "Good luck. How do you turn your brain off?" Or people, when they're meditating, they say, "Okay, now think about not thinking."
Mm,
And there's a bumper sticker on a car on my street, and it says, "Don't believe everything you think." And I says, "Well, you could say, don't believe everything you feel."
mm. Mm. Yeah, and I feel like at the moment we're very much through kind of social media, through this very sort of fast, like we're in this kind of, we're calling on our reptilian brains a lot with the social media likes, things like that. And actually we need to, at the moment, sometimes be pulling back and be using a much more kind of, it's one of the things I really appreciate in reading philosophy, which is a huge influence on everything I do, on my writing, on my therapy work, on me personally. And because of the kind of unselfing that provides us, I feel like that word is so important actually in this day and age. It's a word that Iris Murdoch, the philosopher, uses a lot. Things that take us out of ourselves and allow us to think about the larger community, and allow us to think of maybe a bit longer in history and in time, and all of those things, which and it makes us less neurotic when we
Yeah.
unself as well. We're less involved in our own selves.
Wait, just to clarify, you said Iris has a word that means things that take us out of ourselves. She has.
Unselfing. She uses
Say it
she
again.
just unselfing.
Oh, unselfing.
Yeah,
Wow.
she says, she writes about it in her book. I think it's The Sovereignty of the Good, or The Good of, I can't remember the title of that book.
Yeah.
But she basically says, she gives the example of nature. So if you're looking, and she describes going out and seeing a kestrel, and saying, as she's looking at this kestrel flying in the air, it takes her out of her own kind of
Yeah.
neurosis, her own worry, and she's actually thinking, and I feel like when you read history, that can happen sometimes, because you think, well, okay, yeah, the world's difficult now, but look what it was like in medieval times, or look what it was like even 50 years ago. And these different things, which activities which take us out of ourselves and make us look at the wider picture. And that's where I guess we'll kind of, the social media puts us very much in this feeling of kind of, putting us right here,
Yeah.
it's like fight or flight or freeze or fawn, we're kind of looking at this stuff going, oh my God, I've got to have an opinion, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do
Yeah.
that. And I'm really emotional, I'm going to cry, and then I'm going to, get really happy, and then I'm going to go and buy something, and then I'm going to, it's sort of like, and that's sort of just that kind of stepping back,
It's stepping back. It's almost a flip. It made me think of either Matisse or Cezanne said, if you paint your painting and put in the bushes outside and it blends in, it's a good painting. So here's two from Alan Turing in the 50s. One is thinking a function of the soul.
Is thinking a function of the soul? I don't know, isn't it? Because it depends whether you've got the soul, the spirit, and the body. It depends whether you have a triptych or a duality.
Yeah.
Um, No, I think thinking is a function of I'd say being is the function of the soul, and thinking is the function of the mind.
Yeah, very good. And the second Turing question is, can machines think?
Yeah, but they can't be. In
They
that
can't see. They can't
because that's
see.
the function of the soul.
That is good. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Meaning.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I got it from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He says meaning tends to last and happiness doesn't tend to last. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that all meaning is not about happiness. Sometimes it's about passion, sometimes meaning's about sadness,
Yeah.
but it all contributes to our state of understanding being, which is what machines can't do, is be. They can't know like we do that we're gonna die one day, we are, and that creates our questions about being, which is why I'd say very much being is the state of the soul and thinking is the state of the mind.
Yeah. It's a really good observation because somebody asked AI a question, and then it said, "Hey, well, hope you have a good weekend." And AI responded, "I can't process that."
Mm, yeah.
But it did process it. It answered the question. So
Mm.
it's like, does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
So is the brain detecting consciousness or creating consciousness?
Yeah.
I'd say both,
Yeah.
because I think collectively we're creating it. Like as a group of human beings, we're sharing a kind of knowledge that we have a consciousness, and then we're detecting what we've created.
Yeah.
So we're all kind of deciding what society we want to live in and what our understanding of the world is. Like, for example, if we were having this discussion in the medieval time, we would be having it around, say, if we were both in Europe, we'd be having it around the consciousness of God, because that would be part of our norms and our values. So we're creating it and then we're perceiving it simultaneously. But I'd say we're creating what we perceive perception to be, because that's actually culturally created.
It's really
It's
good.
like there was a really brilliant Instagram reel I saw the other day, which was about understanding of time, and how whether for us the future is in front of us and the past is behind us spatially. So that's our perception. So we think, oh, the future's in front, say if we're North American or we're
Yeah.
European, but if you're in China, I think it's the other way around. So when you actually gesture, you're facing the past because you know it, and the future's behind you because you can't see it.
Wow. I didn't know that because it really evokes, Wyndham Lewis said, artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future.
Mm,
So it's sort of like Ram Dass or Eastern philosophy saying the point of life is to live in the moment, be here now.
yeah. Mm,
And so, what happens with, both James Joyce and Frank Zappa bring up all times are happening now,
mm.
all at onceness.
Mm.
And, but we do create this thing time and,
Yeah,
uh,
and, so we've created what we think our perception should be, like,
yeah,
and I think once you've learnt it, it's, like, I know, having lived I was born in the UK, but I've lived in France over half my life, and it's actually changed my perception. So what I have understood to be norms of things like time, courtesy, social distance have changed from living in another country. So I think,
yeah.
we do create, we invent, and, we create and we perceive. It's the two at the same time.
What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
I'm crap at science. I went to a hippie school. I didn't learn about that stuff.
But I mean, your hunch or your guess.
I'm gonna say thought because
Yeah.
it's more fun.
Well, Susanna, when people say thought, I go, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right. I mean, 80% of people say speed of light. I'm saying, give me a break. We thought up speed of light, so we're speed of thought's faster. I mean, but I'm not. Here's a poet, Audre Lorde. You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Her colleague, Yvonne Rainer, said, oh, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Care.
Care. You really got it. Thank you so much. So I asked people this tool question. And then one guy goes, oh, well, what about a toy? So what toy do you gravitate towards?
What toy?
Yeah.
I think just my imagination.
Yeah. You really get it. This is so fun. Thank you. Okay. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Everything.
I'm glad you could laugh because we're here to have fun. And it's so funny because sometimes people are embarrassed. They go, money. And I goes, that's all right. I'm embarrassed. Whatever it is, it's what they're, saying. So, I mean, let's move on. Here's McLuhan learned.
I'm just trying to think what I think in that kind of neurotic way, isn't it? Where in the middle of the night, everything feels just, but I'm not a huge worrier. I'm not a huge
worrier. Here, let's do a divert. At my mom's funeral service, I said to everybody, there's a lot of people in this room who worried that Dolores worried too much. And so I think there is a difference between worry and concern, but I really think it could be not definable in fine line. If you're worrying about someone, you're concerned about them, but they go, well, no, worry is this and that, but maybe it's, there's another cliche. It goes, if you worry and you gossip, you live longer. So, no, if you complain and you gossip, you live longer. Well, isn't complaining and gossiping sort of like a worry, or is it more a concern? So really the question is, does worry connotate a negative more so and concern is like good, or you don't differentiate? Yeah.
Oh, it definitely is that, isn't it? And gossip is such a humanly excellent thing. I mean,
right.
It's and one of those things. I mean, you're talking about your mum. I don't know what your mum was like, but just that image of kind of that thing with old women gossiping and women sharing that information and how you gossip. And I have 3 daughters, so it's a very female household, and how it's often they'll come back and I'll kind of say, so what's the gossip,
oh, you will say that to the 3 girls?
Yeah.
Oh, that is great. Because I saw your video. I love it. You have a YouTube channel and you have one video and it's you and it's you with your daughters reading. What's it from? What's the book again?
It's oh God, I forgot that was even on there. It was a thing we did at the start of COVID, and it's Sylvia Plath. Now it's quite
Sylvia Plath. That is so heavy.
It's Sylvia Plath who wrote this hilarious book called The Bed Book, and it's not just a bright little turn out the light little tuck me in tight little bed. And so it's all these different beds where you can eat and you can fly and you can, and it's a gorgeous kids book. And we made right at the start of lockdown, I was working in hospitals, but the kids were at home with their dad. And so to distract them, we made that film of us all reading poems in bed.
Oh, I loved it. And it was so well choreographed. And you really got a picture of the 3 and you, but I wanted to suggest do that same thing with either maybe the Molly Bloom soliloquy of Ulysses by James Joyce, or there's many parts in Finnegan's Wake where you could do that same thing, where the three daughters in you would read little excerpts and you change your sunglasses or whatever, and it was really a delight. I love that. It really it helped me because Sylvia Plath is huge. I found this book once in the garbage by her, and it said she loved Un Chien Andalou by Salvador Dali and Louis Buñuel, the movie, and she loved Finnegan's Wake. And I goes, those are my two favorite things. And it was like, I never really read her, and I know her reputation a little, but to see that being, celebrated joyously by kids especially was a real delight. And it reattracted me to pursuing maybe. So here's what McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound. Artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Because I think that Lacan has this idea about the real. And he says that the real is something that is too difficult for us to look at.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a brilliant quote that I wrote about it in my memoir, and I quote it a lot actually, by Susan Sontag, where she says, I think it's 10% of us are 10% of the population are really, really good. 10% are really, really evil. And the rest of the 80%, we're all like a herd of sheep, and we can be swayed and moved around. And she uses it to describe, to say, why did people become Nazis? Why do people, during the Second World War? And I think it's the same thing. I think we have such short memory. And it's really extraordinary whenever you study history and whenever you look even back in your own lifetime, and you start to look at, say, the environment that the world was in. Like when I wrote my memoir, I looked back at the 70s, and one of the things that I found extraordinary was how violent it was when I was growing up in London. There was the IRA bombings, there were hunger strikes, there were race riots, and people were just done. It was like that all the way through the 70s and 80s. And it was like I'd forgotten. I did archival research and went and read newspapers, and I'd forgotten quite what it was like. And I think we just all are like that. So we won't look, we'll have people saying to us, when you were asking the question, it made me think of J.G. Ballard, who wrote extraordinary science fiction books about machines, about climate change, about car crashes, and even H.G. Wells, Brave New World, George Orwell. It's all kind of been there, isn't it? And I think we can't look. That's what Lacan says. We can't look.
Yeah. Do artists have moral obligation?
Yes. I think we all have moral obligation. I don't think artists do more than other people, though.
Yeah.
But I think we all, as human beings, morality is a difficult one, because I think I'd say an ethical obligation.
Yeah. You'd change the word to more ethical than morally. Yeah. That's what I'm at.
Yeah. I feel like morality takes us back to kind of Moors and, the Victorians, and it's I really like the word ethics.
Yeah.
I find it very strong, and it's really interesting because it includes the idea of flexibility around law, and ethical questions are the very complex ones. Whereas I feel like morality kind of stops the gray areas, whereas I feel like ethics allows us to go into those areas and go, this is complicated. It's complicated being a human being. So yeah,
Beautiful.
I'd go
Do you
ethics.
think do you think I should change? So I've asked that question for so many years and I say moral obligation. Do you think I should change the question and say, do artists have an ethical obligation?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. Yeah. I think you could change it.
Yeah. What if
Because
I say, do artists have a moral and or ethical obligation, and give them both?
yeah. And I
Because
think,
here's
yeah.
what, sorry to stuff. Here's what most people say. 80% of people say yes, they have a moral obligation to themselves and to other people. Some
Mm,
people go no, and so they suss it out. But again, it's like I'm always sort of trying to figure out the wording on the question. So I appreciated you shifting, and that's what I most welcome is when people go, the question is this, but I would you didn't literally say I would change the word, but you would say, here's my path and probing that prompt.
mm. I think I'm very wary of morality. I'm very aware. I grew up uh, in a utopian commune. So I grew up in an environment that was very closely controlled
Yeah,
in terms of what was perceived as right and wrong.
yeah,
And it's really interesting when you've grown up in those environments. It was a very Marxist, it was very feminist. So what's really interesting for me is I actually, I adhere to the feminist politics, but not how they were carried out during my childhood. And so I think a really nuanced approach to the ideas of ethics gives us that. Ethics gives us a nuanced approach.
yeah.
Ethics gives us something really, really subtle. And I think whatever we do as human beings, we should be ethical. But I don't think that as the idea of kind of moral crusaders, I have a huge difficulty with, because I think we are all ultimately flawed and imperfect. And it is that imperfection that makes us very human. And holding on to that is an ethical stance, allows us to hold on to imperfection.
You're really concise and articulate. I appreciate this, Susanna. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Neither.
Yeah. Can you
I,
conjure up? Oh, go ahead.
no, it's one of the great things. I feel really privileged to have kids, because they're constantly challenging me on what I think, on, I'm Gen X, they're Gen Z. So it's brilliant. And I feel like I learn so much from them, and I'm learning from their friends, and I'm learning different ways to think. And yet I'm going back and I'm also will read a lot of Greek philosophy from 2000 years ago, and I feel equally I learn from that. So I'm neither scares me more.
Yeah, you're a comprehensivist. You get the big picture. Really beautiful. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I was God, I sound really morbid. I was actually, when I was dying. I nearly died of pneumonia when I was about 2 years old. And I had this series of memories that I'd never understood until I was about 10 years old, and they were all seen. So I was like sucking, I couldn't swallow. And I was sucking a flannel with Ribena on it, and being ill, and went off in an ambulance in the middle of the night. So I remember that from when I was 2. I've got a very, very strong memories of my whole childhood. Actually, I have a very photographic memory, and I've worked with hundreds of people, and I rarely forget a face or the shape of a back.
Wow. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
It's actually, for me, it's sometimes it's a curse because I can't forget things. And so, for example, when I'm working with patients, I actually remember all of their appointments. So they'll come and see me and I'm like, oh yeah, you're seeing the psychiatrist on this. You're going to go and see this person on this. And they look at me and they're like, what? How can you remember that from every single patient? And I'm like, I know. It's just there kind of filed back there.
Yeah.
And I remember all their, and so but on one level it is a curse because I do have a really, really strong memories. And it's a lot of information sometimes in my brain. Sometimes my brain sort of, I feel like it kind of pushes to the outside because and I'm writing novels and I'm writing books. So you really hold a lot. I feel like I hold a lot. I've had craniotherapy and I loved it. And I think because I hold a lot in my brain. And then I feel like this is this extraordinary blessing because boom, it's like there. And you kind of like know that somewhere back. And what I love most is when you can't remember and then you just are waiting for something to come, and you've got
Oh,
to like wait. And it's like, where did that quote come from? Where was that person? What is that book I've read? And then boom, it comes back. And then you've like got it is like being a time traveler. You can just grab it and seize it. And I love that.
I love that too. The funny thing is 80% of people go, it's a blessing. And then they'll go, well, it could be a curse. And you kind of did the opposite. You go, well, it was a curse. And because it's both. Of course, it's both. And it depends. So tell me someone within your immediate family who had an impact on you. And what was that impact?
So the impact, I'd say, in my immediate family, she's not alive anymore, would be my grandma. Because whose name is Crossman is the name is my author's name and the name I use as a writer. And she was one of the first women to go to Oxford University, and incredibly bright, this really extraordinarily bright woman. And as a child, I was quite precocious. Like I'd learned to read when I was 3.5, and I don't think my parents really knew what to do with me. Neither of them were particularly like that. And it was really interesting because my grandma had Parkinson's disease. And it was before it was really treatable like now. And what's really extraordinary is I never really knew my grandma because she couldn't really speak that much. But through these stories that I'd heard, that I constantly heard about her, and I now have all of her books. So a lot of these books here, I'm just going to turn so you can see,
Wow.
are her books. And it was like there was somebody who was like me. And I
Right.
felt like she gave me the possibility, even though I was having this completely other existence in a commune and, kind of off the scale. And she'd kind of gone from this really upper class family and gone to Oxford. And she was somebody who, she only wore handmade shoes. She didn't have a washing machine, but it gave this possibility to an existence. And I think that's a really important thing for children growing up, is that there's a possibility to their existence. There's something possible.
Yeah. She get in knowing that. Oh, so well put. And the way you described it, I really got a picture. You painted it well of her. And my divert question really quick is longevity in life. Is it a little more DNA or a little more lifestyle choice? In other words, putting it in the context of what you just told me, was that inquisitiveness to learn, read books, a little more the DNA from your grandmother, or a little more, the lifestyle choice, the environment, nature, nurture sort of thing? So it's just sort of twofold. Yeah.
So I think for me it was very DNA, because the environment
Right.
I was in was, I was like a nerd in this commune because all the kids were like kind of climbing up trees and doing acrobatics and beating each other up, and I was like the geeky kid with glasses who
who read.
Like, yeah,
So you believe that it was her DNA that seeped into you. Yeah. Okay, now in longevity in life, when people live till they're 80, 90, 100 years old, same thing? You think it's a little more DNA? This is more a general, your hunch or your guess. Is it a little more DNA or a little more lifestyle choice?
Honestly, I think it's both.
Yeah, that's fine.
I see so many patients who, you know, and you just see people's lifestyle choices, or I see it myself, or as I'm looking at my own parents getting older, and whether they're kind of, you know, eating their flax seeds and, you know, drinking enough water and having green tea, or eating processed food. I think that those things definitely make a difference. Yeah.
My dad, when the hippies started, you know, we were starting to eat health food. And we would say to my dad, that has preservatives in it. And he goes, dude, I need all the preservatives I can get. and he lived till he was, you know, like 95. But, you know, I mean, he didn't like, anyways, it's a beautiful thing that you think it was your grandmother's DNA. I love that thought. Now, the same question, Susanna, outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact on you, and what was that impact?
Someone outside my family. Just trying to think of somebody. I was a really I was a very driven child and very, very autonomous from a really, really young age. I'm just trying to think. It would. God, that's such a good question, because I would, you know what I would say? I think it's the people who wrote books. I think it's authors from books.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say,
these are the people for me. These are the people. They're, you know, it's like what Alberto Manguel says in The History of Reading. For me, my community was my books.
Yeah.
It was going to the library. I'm a huge, huge fan of libraries.
Yeah.
And I was going to the library every week and just devouring books of everything. And so authors, all the authors that I read, and how they kind of, you know, I was reading like Laura Ingalls Wilder, and that was kind of, I could relate to that because my mum was milking cows every day. So I felt like I was in Little House on the Prairie. Yeah. And then I was reading these boarding school books like Mallory Towers, and then I was reading The Women's Room, which is like totally not appropriate when I was about 7 years old. I was reading a lot of like Marxist books. I would just grab any book and read it. So yeah, books.
But I love it because you said people who write books. That's called cult of personality. Like, I could follow up and say, give me 3 authors that had an impact on you. I'm not going to do that because you put it in a more generic sense, and it's just the people who wrote books. I love that because that is a beautiful thought. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
No, I wouldn't. My dad comes from a very Protestant Anglican family. So I had that was kind of there in the background. And what's really fascinating is I went to a Church of England school, but it wasn't particularly religious. But I was in a very Marxist environment, where, you know, religion was really looked down upon. But as a child, I actually prayed constantly. And now as an adult, I find organized religion really challenging. My partner's from a Jewish family, and I'm not baptized. And I think the closest thing I've found to a religion for myself, because I feel like I'm a really spiritual person, is philosophy. I feel like that's really, and literature, really give me a huge amount of meaning.
Yeah. That is amazing because you have ESP. The follow-up question I usually say is, I say, were you raised a particular religion? You know, and then people tell me. Then I go, do you pray? So you said, I prayed as a child. So now I have to, do you pray now?
In my own way, yeah.
Yeah.
I think praying is faith in action and ritual and gathering your people. I believe in gathering people
Yeah.
so strongly, whether you gather them spiritually, whether you gather them physically, but the gathering of souls and the being of souls together, I think, is one of our humanity's greatest life forces and the gifts we have.
Yes. Where do you think you got that word gathering of people? Gather, you said gathering your people. Is that those three words from some other source or you just made it up yourself?
No, I made it up myself.
Yeah. I love that. If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I was about to say have a tomato sandwich.
That is so good. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
No, I think evil people do exist.
So the hidden question really is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurai. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Yeah.
JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I think that's completely true.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. I'm slow and stealthy around my enemies. I'm very British. That's where I use my British, stiff upper lip. That comes in with my enemies, very much so. And I'll tell you a story because it made me think of this. When I was a young, I must have been about 15, I went on a cycling holiday once in the Orkneys, quite mad, the islands that are just above Scotland. And I met this guy. I was with a friend of mine, and I met this guy. It was an American guy, actually, on the train. I always talk to strangers. I've never changed. I did that when I was 5. I still do it. I love talking to strangers.
Yeah.
And this guy sat us down and he said, girls, I'm going to tell you what to do if you want revenge on an enemy. So what you do is you're going to get an envelope. And when this person's like someone who's done something really bad, you're going to get an envelope. And he said, and you're going to get like a paper clip and an elastic band, and you're going to put it in the envelope and you're going to send it to the person. And then 1 month exactly after the date, you're going to send it again. And then 1 month after the date, you're going to send it again. And then for a while, you're going to send it every day. And then you're going to stop sending it. And then you're going to start again sending it. And this guy had this whole kind of torturous revenge theory around sending someone a paperclip and an elastic band, which I thought was absolutely extraordinary. And I always look back and I think, who was that man? And why did he tell us that? Like, was he some writer who lived on an island? Was he... It's such an odd thing, and simultaneously you can imagine it in a novel, can't you? Getting a paperclip and an elastic band, and how terrified you, like, weird it would make you feel, how totally deranged it could make you feel.
No, no note, no return address, nothing.
Yeah, just the paper
Amazing.
clip and a elastic band.
Well, that's what I was gonna say is like if your daughters come home and go, I'm being bullied, what advice do you give them?
I'm like a lioness. I always say to them, I wanna smash the person in the face. Like, obviously, I'm not gonna do it. But first of all, I want them to know they have ferocious power behind them and that it's not right. So that is the first thing, that they have love, you know?
Yeah,
And I think that if you're being bullied, to know that someone's got your back is one of the biggest things. And I say this as someone who was bullied and no one told me that. So I was bullied for years and years and years. And I didn't know that anyone, well, no one had my back. And so that's the first thing. And then, to be honest, it all depends on the kind of bullying it is, I think, you
yeah.
know, whether it's bullying that you need to get out of strategically, like you say, about keeping your enemies close, whether you need to be confrontational and say stop. But what is for sure is it has to stop. That's one thing with my kids, I know it has to stop. So either it stops through them doing it first, or it stops through us as their parents stopping it.
Really good. Let me go back though. You tell your child, okay, you got love behind you. You got power behind you. You know,
Mm,
you have where did you learn that? From the way your parents raised you or on your own?
on my own.
From what? From a book or from a life experience?
From I think from I worked for years in child psychiatry, and I think it and I've spent years trying to kind of understand, I guess, how groups work. I'm fascinated by group dynamics.
Yeah,
Um, and so I think for me it comes from trusting my own instinct
yeah.
that I feel like I have, and developing that instinct, I guess, because I think you can't just say can always trust your instinct, because you're like I say, my instinct might be I want to go and smash, slap somebody. Well, I'm not. No, that's not a good instinct. I'm not going to go and do that. That's something I might say, but I'm not going to do it. And I think from reading a lot about child development, um, and nurturing that instinct. I think a lot in life is about that, isn't it? It's about kind of seeing how your kind of gut reacts, and then which bits of that you want to listen to or not, and which bits are worth kind of pursuing. So I feel like it's something and that I feel really strongly about. And I also do a lot of supervision with people. So I kind of go into organizations and talk to people about ethical questions and what's right or wrong. And I feel like for myself and in that work, I've developed a very clear code of conduct. So whether that's for my children bullying, whether it's and I feel really clear about banging my fist on the table if I need to.
Again, you're really concise and articulate, and you're teaching me a lot. I appreciate this. And so the follow up is Nassim Taleb saying games were created to give non heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. My friend said, well, villains don't think they're bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. And Gregory Bateson says if the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff? Or does he say, I did something morally and socially wrong? So again, it's a lot of prompts. The basic question is, or you can go wherever you want, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
I don't think punishment works actually, but I do believe in it.
Right. I do believe in it. But would you substitute the words like now, again, this is the wording on my question. Does rehabilitation and reform work? I kind of want to leave it, does punishment work? Because
I
yeah, go ahead.
So we currently live in our system is a democracy. And I think there's a lot of weaknesses and fragility in that system. And that system uses prison, for example, as a form of punishment, and other institutions actually as forms of punishment. And so I don't think that punishment always works. So, for example, I don't think prison for rapists is always something that reforms people. But I know we have to, we're in that system. So I guess it's kind of knowing the weakness of the system. Rehabilitation, I think, can work. It's a very complex question, isn't it? It's really interesting when you work in psychiatric hospitals because there's the whole question of whether someone's responsible for their action or whether they were mentally ill and that caused it. And it's very interesting having to draw that line with patients that you work with, so who may have been sexual aggressors or been really, really violent. So I've worked in closed units quite a lot. And I do believe people have a responsibility.
Yeah. It's funny because someone said, well, Malcolm X admitted that jail saved him or something, however he words it, that him going to jail is what he had a transformation. But I love you saying punishment doesn't work, but I believe in it because, what are you going to do if this person's killing people on the street? It's a hard thing. So James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, William Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
So this is going back to the thing I said of the woman who worked in the prison. And I said at the beginning, Nancy Houston, the novelist who went and worked in prisons, and the prison said to her exactly that. Why do we write? Why are you writing a novel when our lives as prisoners is completely absurd and like a novel? And she says, so we can understand something before we die.
Yeah, before we die. That's
she's like, she writes this whole book about why do we create fiction, and I feel like it's the whole way as human beings we use beauty and metaphor, and it's the role of the humanities. I feel like this is a major thing that currently around the world, as we see humanities and philosophy departments and literature departments and anthropology departments closing, is that we're forgetting that these are all about what it means to be human. So we create culture basically to make sense of dying, love, sickness, birth, natural disaster, the randomness of our existence. I think that's why we have it, because we're sentient, we know we're going to die. We know there's an end. And therefore, culture is what we share together. I share with you, I share with all the other people who, and it gives us this extraordinary sense of meaning around our emotions.
I want to go into your background in tipping points and becoming a writer, but I have to shoot this question in because it seems timing is perfect. Hollis Frampton, experimental filmmaker. Narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die.
Yeah.
And my question is, can you forget to die?
I don't think you can forget to die, but I think you can forget death. And I think you forget death by sometimes being very, very close to death.
Yeah.
Because I think there's that really extraordinary thing when you brush up closely against death or people dying, where you suddenly seize the day. I mean, I think there's something quite extraordinary. My last novel, The Orange Notebooks, is about a grieving mother who loses her child, and her whole journey through this first year of exceptionally raw death and grieving. And there's something, and through the book she'll be exploring a Greek myth of, and now of course I'm going to forget the Greek myth through my lack of concentration at this moment, where the guy is going to look back at his wife and see whether she's coming up from Hades.
Yeah.
And so there's this idea in the book about walking hand in hand with death, and it is something. I've lost two sisters quite young, and I've been through a period of my life where I lost lots and lots of people, and I think it was a very active choice to go through those grieving processes, confront death, and then very much be able to then walk with it, actually.
Yeah. Wow. So well done. Confront it and walk with it. So you're reading at age 3. The two kind of callings in your life that I understand is therapist and writer.
Mm.
Okay. Where's the tipping point where you go, that's my calling? And which came first? Did you pursue being a writer as a career before the therapy, or did you go to college to be a therapist?
No, I actually, before that, I was an actress. So
So your first calling was in being an actress.
I was I'm a bit Renaissance like that. And I also work in universities. So I think I began writing my first stories when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And then I was also in plays. And the therapy work, I think, is something that, like I always say, I lecture a lot in hospitals and I've written a lot about hospitals. And I always, when I go in and I run big seminars, I always say to people, I fell into a hospital, by chance. And it almost is a bit like that. So I trained originally in drama. And then I had an option in drama therapy. And then I began working in clinical situations and found this absolute passion for what I've always described as building bridges towards people, or building bridges between people, I would say.
Yeah.
So people who feel isolated, like they've not got a way to connect,
Yeah.
and this extraordinary role that the arts provide to us. So I've worked in drama therapy, and I've worked in arts therapy in general. And then simultaneously, I've always written, but there's been very clear moments in my life where I've engaged, I think is the word I'd use, very clearly in my writing, where I've recognized that if I'll take a choice, say, for example, not to do a PhD, I thought for a while I'll do a PhD, and it was like, no, I have to write creatively. Oh,
Right.
and at certain moments, I think I love that word in French. It's s'engager, that verb, to engage, that thing where you kind of grasp something and you shake your hands with it, and it's like, I'm not letting you go.
Yeah.
We will walk together through the rest of my life.
Is
And
that called obsession?
yeah.
Yeah. Or it's like calling. You're calling.
Yeah, it's a calling. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you really sussed out again well, because you really 4 things. You drama, writing, therapy, and you're an educator because you lecture.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So let's go into being a fiction writer, or called autofiction, for a second. A screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process as a fiction writer?
So I work a bit using the process that Schiller describes, which is, so he was an Austrian philosopher and actually quite influenced Freud's idea of kind of people simultaneously making free associating. So the idea of Schiller is that you've got this gate and you've got these kind of watchers at the gate who are your rational mind. And what Schiller says is when you're going to be really, really creative, you need to take the watchers away and you write or you paint or whatever it is. And then you bring them back and then they come and they look at what the intention of the piece might be. It's a very similar thing what Jackson Pollock does with action painting. He chucks all the paint and then he looks at what is emerging and makes meaning from that. So I've just finished the first draft of a new novel and I wrote it in about, I don't know, over 4 months. I gave myself 3,000 words a day. Every day I sat down, I was just like, I'm going to write 3,000 words. Didn't read over really what I'd read before. Got the first draft, and it's just so extraordinary when you work like that. I feel like it's such a creative way to work. But then you go back and you use intentionality. Then you go back and look at the structure, what needs cutting, what needs keeping, what needs developing. It's not like that piece of work is ready to go to a publisher. So I work, that's really how I work, and I love working like that.
That is so good. Schiller's first name again?
I don't know. It's Schiller.
Okay, I know. That's good.
Yeah.
He's so he sort of came out of Freud. This is Harold Bloom. I'm curious if this relates. He said, anxiety of influence. Absorb your influence, then abandon them. It's like, good luck. How do you abandon them? It sounds good and romantic, but you know, and that's because, you know, so-and-so became a clone of this person, or they're just, you know, come out of that person. And then T.S. Eliot saying this, the mature poet steals, the immature poet imitates. So any thoughts on that? Absorb your influence, then abandon them. In regards, what I got from Schiller, or you telling me this is, yeah, abandon them and then rethink.
Yeah.
Don't abandon.
I think your influences, like I never read writers who are like my writing while I'm writing a book. I'll, and I think it's that at the moment I'm writing a new essay about Breton traditional faith healers who are called fire tamers. Really extraordinary. And so I'm doing all the research. I was printing out all these things today. So I'll read all the research and then I'll see what kind of floats to the surface. So what is remaining there? What is, and it's a bit like Jane Didion when she puts her manuscript in the freezer. I love that image. It's kind of like those moments where you sort of you have to step away from things so that what you are doing, it's your unique voice. And that's the hardest thing as an artist, I think, is really to push and push to the limits and be brave enough to go with what your unique voice is and what you know makes you vibrate and makes you sing and makes you jump with joy and cry, and that's what you're trying to do. And so therefore it's that distance so that those things are emerging, but they're emerging for you.
So just to clarify, Joan Didion writes a manuscript, puts it in the freezer, but then does she pull it out and then rewrite and check it later? She means have some distance for a while, some time period. Yeah. That's also, Cocteau said this great line about when you create your first piece of art, you know, your family, your friends, and your teachers will go, oh, that's really good, but you colored outside the line, and they'll give you some criticism, or if they do. He said, take that criticism and exploit it for the rest of your career. I love that line, because it's back to McLuhan's line: carefully make plans, then do the opposite. You said the word, it takes courage or bravery, but you're also knowing that the time is important and the rewrite attitude is important. It's not like first thought, best thought. Like
No.
the way I write, sometimes I just write, that's great. And then I like, well, and then I want to refine it. And you kind of learn. I never learned how to refine well, but I love that idea, that you rewrite is it's called editing in filmmaking. Yeah, in a way. So traditional faith healers, is that snake oil salesman?
No, they're called, well, they're fascinating, because in France, there's two regions. There's Eastern France and Western France, where most of these fire tamers are situated. But it's an unbroken tradition over hundreds, if not thousands of years of traditional healing. So what's really extraordinary is that the way this healing works has not changed for centuries. And it's barely known outside of France.
But it's pseudoscience?
Depends how you want to understand it. Or you can call it like traditional faith healers, like shamanic medicine, or it's you could call it, but they're integrated into hospitals.
Oh, they are. Because see, that's you again had ESP. So if you look up pseudoscience, if you look up fasting, and they say that's pseudoscience. I go, if I go to have my colonoscopy or a procedure at the hospital, and they go, you got to fast from eating for a day, I go in there and I go, do you know that fasting is pseudoscience? And they just look at me and go, look, dude, you have to fast for a day before we do this operation. So you mean you're practicing pseudoscience in a hospital? So it's a fine line, because
it's such a fine line, and a lot of these practices are around belief. And one of the things that a lot of the fire tamers I've interviewed will say is, I do not heal. I won't get rid of a cancer. I cannot. What I do is I soothe the fire. That's what they're doing. They're doing this traditional thing, which is called soothing the fire, which is calming or appeasing the fire. So it's quite extraordinary. But I'll send you the link to the article when it'll be out in April.
I don't heal is a really good. This is what I learned in Eastern philosophy. They teach you to maintain your body. In the West, we go to the doctor, could you cure this? And the doctor will go, well, here's an effective remedy, but it kind of appears it's going to be a cure. So if I get an infection and they give me antibiotics, the infection goes away. It kind of cured the infection, you think. But if you maintain your body, that's what you kind of want to do. So they don't heal. They lay it out. We don't heal, we soothe it, which is like kind of the wording effective remedy. So Susanna, Marcel Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your reader when you're writing your fiction?
I think in the first draft, I'm not thinking about them. I'm just following the characters and the madness of whatever they're doing. And kind of just getting excited. I'm like, wow, I didn't think you were going to do that. Oh my God. So I think in that first draft, and then in the bit where Schiller's, I've taken Schiller's kind of watchers away. When Schiller's watchers come back, I am thinking about the reader, because then I'm thinking about plot, and I'm thinking about coherence, and I'm thinking about style, and I'm thinking, so the first draft, though, I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about being creative. I'm just being creative.
So Marshall McLuhan got from Joyce and Whitman that everything humans invent extends some humanness. Knife and fork extends our teeth. Shutter in a camera or projector extends our eyelid. And maybe non-tangible, say religion or philosophy, extends consciousness.
Yeah.
What does the writing utensil extend for you? Whether it's a pen or a keyboard, what humanness does it extend?
The soul.
Yeah. So I think you mentioned unbearable likeness of being somewhere. And this is Kundera saying, this is why I love writing, because the character that I'm writing about can go further than I can. To me, if I write a character on this piece of paper, that sounds romantic, what he's saying. How can that character go further than your writing? I mean, you just said it. You just said, they go mad, and I'm like, wow, and you go along for the ride. Yeah.
And I think because they'll do things that you don't expect them to do, and then they'll go further than the writing, because part of the writing of a book is that if I've written my orange notebooks about a grieving mother and you read it, the writing will then go further in your mind as you read the book. So it will become something completely different as you are reading it. So I think there's how the characters go further as you as a writer are writing them, and then there is where they go with the reader, which is just such an extraordinary thing, with the process that each of us, and particularly because reading is such a solitary experience, silent reading, because obviously people used to read out loud, but now we all read silently. But the fact that a person will be there opening the book, and I love that image of the book as almost being like a kind of house and a space that you enter kind of through a door, and you'll go inside this imaginary space and you'll meet all these characters, but then who they are to you, Gerry, will become something ultimately
Yeah.
even bigger and different to what I, Susanna, imagined them being.
Yeah. Again, really well put, because it evokes so McLuhan wrote 22 books about from 40 to 80s. In mid-career, he kind of got known because he came up with this aphorism, the medium is the message, or the medium is the massage. Mid-career, he updated that and goes, nope, it's no longer that. Most people don't know this. He updated it to the user is the content. Is that what Kundera, see, what when I ask people this question, what you're telling me is Kundera really meant the character I'm writing about can go further than I can, according to the reader. It can't go further than he can as the writer, can it? Because it is a symbiotic thing, but it's like here's the other thing. Sorry, one more thing. Once the person creates their art and puts it out to the world, it's no longer theirs. The user can use it any way they want.
I would say that there are limits to that. I don't think they can use it any way they want, in the sense that there are. So, for example, if you have a painting, that painting cannot become a novel. If you have a novel, you can take that novel, but it's a book in a book form. So they can't use it any way they want. They can't make music into a painting, or it becomes a different form of artwork. So I'd say there's a kind of material limit to the idea of it becoming anything it wants. But I would say that ultimately what's interesting in art is that there is the moment where we have, I would say what it does is I'd say what Kundera is saying is it transcends. We are having a transcendental almost experience. So as a writer, you're maybe touching parts of yourself, your subconscious, your soul, your whatever kind of framework kind of philosophically you want to put it within, or but you're brushing up against sides of yourself that if you didn't make art, you wouldn't reach it. So you are going beyond you yourself in your everyday life and touching, you're kind of pushing, like if you imagine your being like you're being a kind of plastic sort of thing, you're pushing it, pushing it, pushing it, pushing it to its limits. And I think that's what you're doing. And then when you kind of produce that work of art and someone else reads it or looks at the painting or the music, that again, they're pushing it and pushing it and pushing it.
This has been really fun, and then we're almost hit the 90-minute point. I would really love to do a part 2 somewhere down the line, like 5 or 6 months, because we really didn't get into literature as deep as I wanted to. But I wanted to say that what McLuhan was talking about was form and content. So people misunderstood him, and he's saying, oh, people just go for the content, like T.S. Eliot, the watchdog of your mind. They just go for the content. They don't understand there's form there. And so he overemphasized form, but he knew that they're both important, that form and content. And that's why when his son taught me, Eric McLuhan taught me this great thing, that the word fact, F-A-C-T, and the word fake, F-A-K-E, both derive from the Latin root word to make. So here's the poet critic Helen Vendler, who passed away in the last year or so. She says, I write to explain things to myself. How do you process that?
I think again, it's that idea, isn't it? You see these things that emerge in your work, like the importance of what has entered you as a human being, and suddenly you see that your work is asking these questions, asking fundamental questions that you've come across in your life and that you as a human being. So for example, when I was 4 months old, I was in a freak accident with my 2 elder sisters, and a wall fell on us. Terrible accident, completely freak accident. And I was only 4 months old. One of my sisters died, and me and the second sister survived this accident. And I think that, for example, is something that just emerges constantly in my work as a question of randomness and fate and destiny. And those themes and things, it's like Louise Bourgeois, the artist. When you look at Louise Bourgeois' work, and she has a brilliant quote, I make, I unmake, I remake.
Oh my God. I make,
I unmake and I remake.
and I remake. Yeah.
And I think that's what we're all doing. We have these questions, whether it's Klein and the question of the color blue, or
Yeah.
Van Gogh and orange and blue, or whether our question is about language or about death or about trees and landscape. And we will circle and keep asking those questions. And
Yeah.
I think it's a glorious pursuit as a human being.
Yeah. Because it's Steve Martin loves to quote David Mamet. Art is a product of the unconscious mind. Now, I think me and you have been pretty conscious here for 90 minutes. Lakoff and all the neuroscientists and linguists say, oh, you're operating 80% unconsciously. What's your take on that? Art is a product of the unconscious mind. Because when you sit down to recall what happened to you and your 2 sisters, you're consciously recalling that. But somehow, does the unconscious come through your arm into your pen and start, yeah.
Well, what I mean is I don't consciously do it. That's what I mean. I'll be writing. So, for example, I'll have an idea of a crime fiction, and all of a sudden there will be a child who's died. This is what I mean. I'm not consciously writing about that. And those themes will somehow emerge. And I think it's like there's a brilliant image of the palimpsest, which is something that I really love. So palimpsests were monks' vellums. So they were writing on these, they didn't obviously have paper at that time, they were writing on calfskin. And what they would do is they'd have one text that was on it, and then they'd scrape it out and they'd write again another one. So all of the text that had been underneath was still on this palimpsest, but you couldn't see them anymore. And I think as human beings, we operate like that. So from when we're born, whether we're born, I don't know, in New York, whether we're born in sub-Saharan Africa, whether we're born in the UK, it's as though all of these experiences are kind of building up, and a lot of them are invisible to us after a while. Our early childhood experience, we don't even remember them. We can't. Yeah. And then as we're making art and we're going about our everyday life, we are in some shape or form communicating all of those experiences from in our nonverbal communication. So someone who's done ballet as a child, they might now weigh, I don't know, 20 kilo, like 100 kilos. You wouldn't imagine they'd ever done ballet, but yet they will literally hold their back in a way where you can still see if you observe it very closely. And I think our minds and our souls and our bodies retain all those experiences. And then when we're making work, artistic work, they're kind of just, they arrive. And it's really extraordinary. It's like these seeds and these beautiful flowers that just emerge.
That's great. Even that Salvador Dali, where he painted something and then he painted over it, and then they go back and uncover what he painted before. Mm-hmm. But that layering thing, that monk thing, I would love to learn more about that, because it also reminds me of Maria Callas saying, in order to be an artist, you have to have half your brain in control and half of it out of control.
And you have to. It's otherwise it's so boring. Like, I don't know. I bought all these books a while ago. I was like, God, maybe I should be really rational and do one of those charts. And then I was just like, I looked at these books and I was like, oh, fuck, no. I don't know. The mess of stuff is, I mean, you can see my mess.
No, I love it.
It's very much.
It's great just having Zooms where you get to see what people decide to have in back of them.
Well, I was like, I'm just going to go for actually au naturel, what it's really like in this space.
No, my favorite was this great musician I interviewed, and he had a ladder in back of him against the wall. And I was like, wow, because, we think.
That's a good idea. I could have put it there.
I was like, what? And, it's just, it wasn't like probably a conscious thing. He was just like, well, I'm going to have my laptop here. And so, Susanna, this has really been a delight, and I really thank David for connecting us, and I really hope we can get deeper into, there's so much about literature I like to explore, the difference between narrative and storytelling, and the whole ritual and techniques of that, but as well, the emphasis you have on art, you dropping, Pollock's name and teaching me about Pollock alone, stepping back and being able to that whole being conscious in an unconscious medium, or it appears to be an unconscious medium, because I'm into avant-garde jazz, and people like they went up to Sun Ra, who's going to be on PBS in America and the American Masters, so they're making it, accessible to normal people. And, he played piano like, it's just all over the place. And a guy went backstage and says, my kid could do that. And Sun Ra went, but can he transcribe it? So thank you so much, Susanna. I really appreciate it.
It was amazing.
And, even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever. And I look forward to a part 2 someday. Thank you.
Definitely. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks.